even know how I learned about Klaus Schwab. I honestly don't remember. But when I started listening to what he was saying and hearing all the absolute nonsense he was talking, I got very concerned, especially about how the coming out of the pandemic and how what they were proposing and how it was going to impact kids and future generations and freedom and all that stuff. And so I decided before I even took a class that I was going to write a paper on it. And I did. And so that's what this discussion today is all about, is this paper that I wrote. It's currently being peer reviewed. It's going to hopefully be published in an educational journal about comparative educational systems. And so we'll see, you guys can pray that it actually will get published. That would be amazing. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Yep, you're all clear to do that.
And just start talking. And if you guys, I won't really be able to see hands if you raise hands, or I can't monitor the chat box. But you're welcome. You're welcome to interrupt me if you don't understand something, or if I'm not being clear. That'd be great.
Yeah. And otherwise, put questions in the chat box, and we'll circle back on those. Absolutely,
circle back. That's right.
I like that expression.
I liked it until Jen Psaki.
I know, that's it's kind of tainted now, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. All right, so thanks for taking time out of your day to join me today. We're going to talk about the Great Reset and its implications for educational policy. So today we're going to look at the current landscape. We're going to discuss the 5 priorities of the Great Reset that the World Economic Forum has put forth. And those include redefining the social contract, controlling the carbon output, the 4th Industrial Revolution, stakeholder capitalism, and global governance. And once we've discussed what they have to say, we'll talk about what our response might want to be. Scripture is clear. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death. It is my strong opinion that the Great Reset, which may seem right to the men proposing it, will lead to death. Death of society, death of people, death in general. And I know that's pretty strong, but I think that once we get through this, I hope you'll agree with me. So the pandemic had a cataclysmic impact on economies, societies, and people. The globe is slowly making its way out of the mess and coming into a state of recovery from the devastation. The World Economic Forum hopes to shape the recovery by providing information to those determining the future state of global relations, the direction of national economies, the priorities of societies, the nature of business models, and the management of global commons. And they call this process the Great Reset Initiative. According to an audio recording entitled The Great Reset, Resetting the World, there are 3 possible approaches as the pandemic subsides, according to the WEF. First, people can get mad, assign blame, and get bitter. Second, there can be a return to the status quo of life pre-pandemic. And they propose a third possibility of constructing a new conceptualization of the world based on what was learned. And I quote here, a more resilient, more inclusive, and more sustainable world. So, redefining the social contract, controlling carbon output, implementing the 4th Industrial Revolution, transitioning to stakeholder capitalism, and moving toward greater global governance will require a substantial reworking of educational systems around the world. And that's what we're going to talk about.
Okay.
So, according to them, regarding the social contract, they want to encourage inclusion by bridging the gap between industrialized and emerging countries. Regarding the carbon output, they want to focus on biodiversity and how business works with it. Regarding the fourth industrial revolution, they want to merge physical, digital, and biological worlds with fusing technologies. Regarding stakeholder capitalism, they want to emphasize assessing, comparing, and tracking environmental, social, and governance standards, which are also known as ESG. And then finally, they want to, regarding global governance, they want to change how people live, work, travel, consume, and interact. So, what is a social contract? The concept of a social contract became popular through the works of Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, beginning in the 1600s, and much of Western political thought rests on the concept. Simply put, it's a social contract is an actual or hypothetical agreement among the members of an organized society or between a community and its rulers that defines and limits the rights and duties of each. However, Schwab doesn't expound on which one of the definitions he wants to use or which one he wants to spring off of when he redefines this. So if you break down our current understanding, Hobbes believed in a strong monarchy where the citizens have agreements among themselves, but the sovereign isn't really part of it, but rather the creator of it. From an educational perspective, according to Hobbes, the conscientious sovereign would vigilantly oversee the intellectual life of his subjects from the cradle to the universities and from there to the grave. So that's what Hobbes thinks. Locke advocated for a representative democracy. He believed that government was necessary to save humanity from the state of nature or chaos. Additionally, according to Locke, monarchy is no form of government at all. In fact, according to Locke, it's worse than the state of nature. He didn't consider music or poetry to have any value. He emphasized breeding and achievement versus birth and divine right. And he felt that education should bridge the social gap between the country gentleman and the city merchant. Notice Locke has nothing to say here about the poor. Rousseau stands for extreme individualism against the claims of society. He stands as an opponent of authority, an upholder of a certain ideal of character, and in particular, he lays little stress on self-control. So here you have these three, social contract philosophers, and Schwab never says which one he really wants to go, model his thing or actually springboard off of, right? Because these are the people who came up with the concept to start with. Now, what about educating the poor? Because, if you remember what I said earlier, the Great Reset wants to bridge the gap between emerging nations and industrialized nations. So we have to talk about how we're going to educate the poor, right? According to Hobbes, parents hold their children in trust until such time that the sovereign reclaims the right. So parents have no authority. It's actually the king or the queen that owns the kids. Locke believed that the poor are undisciplined and corrupt, and he proposed impressing beggars from ages 14 to 50 for 3 years in the Navy. That was his solution to poverty. And Rousseau just simply said, why do they need an education? So here again, we have Schwab wanting to do this, but gives no indication of where he wants to springboard off of any of these gentlemen. So which way should we go? The assumption that the entire globe will assent to Western political thought without the benefit of the 1,000 or so years of struggle it took to get the West to this understanding is the epitome of hubris. Carbon output. So what does the carbon output have to do with education? Well, according to the UN, education is a key player in the struggle with climate change. In fact, it is number 4.7 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So that's why we're going to talk about that.
Sure.
However, we've got a big problem. In June of 2019, the UN and the WEF signed a memorandum of understanding on a strategic partnership framework for the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. In September of that same year, over 400 endorsers signed an open letter to the Secretary General of the UN to condemn this union. Their concern centered around permanently associating the UN with transnational corporations who may have, and definitely do have, right, conflicts of interest with the aims of the UN in general and with sustainable development, the climate crisis, and the elimination of poverty and hunger in particular. This corporate capture, as the letter put it, puts the globe on a trajectory that aligns with the ambition of the WEF toward global governance. And we'll talk about this later. So now we have these guys in bed with each other, right? And they have completely different goals. So in addition to this troublesome union between the WEF and the UN, the WEF is championing switching the entire planet to a plant-based diet. It had, although, you know, first and second world countries, they may be okay with it, it will potentially devastate the global south. According to the World Bank, livestock contributes 40% of the global value of agriculture output and supports the livelihoods and food and nutritional security of almost 1.3 billion people. So why are they going after this? Well, it stems from a concern and comments from people like Bill Gates, who claim that cows emit more pollution than cars. In order to impact the dietary choices of the global population, there's going to have to be a significant push in the realm of education. And so in 2021, a study was done in Sweden, attempting to design a diet for adolescents that ate meat to transition to a diet with a lower carbon footprint. They found that an exclusively plant-based diet presents nutritional deficiencies, and that replacing meat has also been shown to be questionable from a climate perspective, because on a per calorie basis, the substitution of meat products with increased fruit and vegetables can result in higher or similar environmental impacts. So the whole thing is built on a house of cards. Another study, which I find the most just bizarre, it suggested creating a low carbon cow. The result is that through climate engineering, corporate interests are, via a combination of bioengineering, technological fixes, and management practices, creating a new animal that is more desirable from a climate change point of view. And agribusiness, big agribusiness like Monsanto and those kind of big agribusinesses are instructing their farmers to only use certain breeds of cows and feed them only in a prescribed way, which is the farming version of a social credit score that China is using, right? Those farmers who practice subsistence farming will be cut out of the market entirely. By way of an example, the solution for a country like India, having the largest cow population in the world, would be devastating. So moving on, the fourth industrial revolution. Klaus Schwab actually wrote a book by that title. He said that the first industrial revolution occurred with the introduction of the machine, the second with the advent of electricity, the third with the arrival of automation and digitization. The fourth builds on the digital revolution, but it will merge the digital world with the biological and physical worlds, including big data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, quantum computing, and genetics, nanotechnology, and robotics. The fusion of these concepts will force the planet to confront the question of what it even means to be human. The WEF sees the installation of 5G technology as a key to the success of the fourth industrial revolution, but It's lamenting the fact that so many countries are falling behind. And this synthesis, this merging, is going to have a tremendous impact on the workforce, on employment, and on education. Merging these worlds may seem like a concept straight out of science fiction, but in reality, doctors have been moving in this direction for quite some time. It takes on many forms, including genetic engineering, biological engineering, stimulant drugs, transcranial magnetic stimulation, brain-computer interfaces, and even genetic modifications. According to Yuval Harari, in his book Sapiens, all of these potential cognitive enhancements, as he calls them, are how culture is releasing itself from the shackles of biology. So people have been using gimmicks for memories since the beginning of time. Sometimes they work, other times they don't. However, once a user introduces something into their biochemistry, a pill, for example, the side effects could prove problematic. For example, pills can negatively affect mood, and the user may be labeled as weak or stupid or dangerous, and thus social interactions and relationships may be effective, whereas it is rather unlikely that the real-life user of a mnemonic method will be stigmatized in the same manner. The question of addiction is also something that can't be overlooked, which is apparent when comparing cognitive enhancements with performing enhancement drugs used in sports, right? An unintended consequence of pill-induced motivation on the agency could be that intrinsic motivation to perform tasks generally declines, and that pills become essential in motivating people, which is akin to the phenomenon of addiction. On the other hand, if this type of enhancement were to become normal, then what about those people who refuse to use this? Is society ready to blame a doctor for a failed operation because he didn't use some sort of cognitive enhancement when it was available? This negative consequence of the non-use of a distinct performance-enhancing method would constitute a measurable difference in outcomes and could be considered a non-medical side effect of biotechnology. Furthermore, in the area of genetic engineering, scientists who were studying voles, and voles apparently are notorious for being promiscuous except for this one species, assert that they have isolated the genes responsible for vole monogamy. And if they can create a monogamous vole, what will prevent them from doing the same thing for humans? If they decide to genetically alter these types of social structures, what will be their replacement? And who will decide the morality of that? Some scientists, believe it or not, have gone so far as to say that because Homo sapiens were responsible for the extinction of Neanderthals, it has a moral duty to resurrect them. And these scientists want to resurrect Neanderthals to do menial labor. So in effect, they are creating a class of slaves. Medical devices have been used to assist people since the invention of eyeglasses in the 13th century. Today, eyeglasses have evolved to the point of becoming smart, and they go far beyond the point of correcting someone's biological vision deficiencies. They are similar to a smartphone, and they're equipped with GPS, but can also use a variety of sensors to track, analyze, distribute, and store data about the surrounding environment as well as the user. Ultimately, they have the ability to alter the way people learn. The concept of praxistomology, coined by Stephen Mann, a Canadian engineer, is a learning approach that combines learning by doing with learning by being and learning through inquiry. Smart glasses connect to the internet, track eye movements, which allow merchants to market products more directly. And they even recognize places and faces, instantly connecting them to social media profiles. In essence, through this device, people become hackable. This gadget is capable of studying the user to such an extent that it can enhance the wearer's desires, which raises the question of personal autonomy. Software applications can be added that could make moral decisions for the user without independent self-reflection. So, without human agency, does learning actually take place? Stephen Mann goes on to say that after more than 30 years of having a computer be part of my body, I no longer really distinguish between thinking and computing. Today, smartwatches, smart glasses, and other smart gadgets that can be worn are a multi-billion-dollar industry. Biological engineering is taking these medical devices even farther. Instead of external devices, they are implanting them inside the body and connecting them directly to the brain. There are currently bionic ears that send a signal directly to the auditory nerve, and retinal implants that allow blind people to see by implanting microchips directly into their eyes. BCI, which is brain computer interface application, empowers autistic spectrum disorder participants by providing immediate feedback on their attention focus. This information enables the individual to self-monitor their performance about where to gaze, and thus enables them to change their behavior. For disabled individuals, this is exciting progress, but this type of computer brain interface could be utilized in order to give a physiologically normal individual a competitive edge, and for which the automation or outsourcing would be advantageous to the user. For example, let's talk about math skills. Calculators can solve math problems far quicker than the average brain. Why not implant a calculator into a person's brain in order to alleviate the stress of having to figure things out? Many people struggle with math. Such a BCI could help to alleviate any anxiety caused by this struggle. Considering this phenomenon from a global perspective, proponents of BCI see this as a way of leveling the playing field by simultaneously connecting all the greatest minds together through the internet via cloud technology. In this way, all mental and material resources, including performance-enhancing methods, should be used to foster the intellectual, technological, economic, and cultural wealth of nations. From the point of view of the individual, the increasing intellectual ability could prove financially rewarding. A company called Neuralink is developing technologies that will allow humanity to advance apace with artificial intelligence, and it aims to create a device that would allow for interface between the human brain and a computer for cognitive tasks, including brain backups. There are many who challenge this transhumanist narrative. They are concerned about that this will further divide the world between technologically advanced countries and those that have not yet reached the level of development. Several opponents also believe that cognitive enhancement constitutes a major departure from current common and accepted forms of self-improvement, such that they threaten our evolution or as a species or jeopardize significant cultural practices. So it is certain that robotic technology has the potential to greatly enhance human cognition. BCI technologies will extend the mind rather than chemically altering it with drugs, which is great, right? The question is no longer can it be done, but should it be done? For example, this potential interbrain net would allow people to access memories of anyone attached to it, not just their own. What makes this different from cyborgs of science fiction? What happens to identity? What happens to dreams and aspirations? This transhuman cyborg wouldn't be organic or human, but something other. Even with biomedical devices that have a long history, there is controversy. Some people who are deaf consider cochlear implants to be de facto enhancements rather than a treatment. The ability to hear or to see beyond what is natural to humans has potential safety concerns with this type of invasive BCI technology. Such technologies applied to other kinds of knowledge could revolutionize education and allow humanity, free from the arduous necessities of rote memorization, to accelerate and achieve a greater potential. But my question is, having lost personal identity and human agency, would the loss of creativity be that far behind? Utilizing cognitive enhancements may alleviate the economic stress caused by the advent of artificial intelligence. As a result of the fourth industrial revolution, the WEF predicts that by 2022, that's this year, automation will displace 75 million jobs. But they say it will also generate 133 million jobs across the world. And Gartner, which is a firm here in the US, says that the creation of 2 million net new jobs will happen by the year 2025. However, a recently published paper by MIT and Boston University economists revealed that robots and AI may replace up to 2 million workers by 2025 in the manufacturing sector alone. So that will demand that we reskill a bunch of workers in a very short period of time. And in 2019, a report by the European Education and Culture Executive Agency stated that only about 11% of adults between the ages of 25 and 64 participated in education and training programs. So at this rate, the supply will not keep up with the demand for skilled workers. Europe represents a snapshot of the West and doesn't begin to address the challenges of the global South, where even basic educational needs are not universally met. There, the problem is not so much reskilling an aging workforce, but rather reskilling the workforce to start with. According to the WEF, global demographic change shifts may help to address this issue. With the aging population in Germany, for example, immigration may help to alleviate the decline in skilled labor. It will fall to society to invest in reskilling the workforce. Bridging the skills gap will require a new approach to learning that appreciates the various stakeholders around the globe. And this is why Klaus Schwab is pushing for a true global civilization with the potential to robotize humanity and thus compromise our traditional sources of meaning: work, community, family, and identity. My question again is, what cost? Dr. Harari believes that these enhanced transhumans will eventually become commonplace, and that those who refuse these enhancements will be considered useless people. Is humanity ready to devolve into a brave new world caste system? Stakeholder capitalism. Now, I know I've got a bunch of economists on the line here, and I am not an economist. So just keep that in mind. Schwab made the declaration that there needs to be a reset of capitalism. This goal is problematic on multiple levels. First and foremost, capitalism isn't even practiced in every area around, in every country around the globe, right? In fact, capitalism is the majority of the world is not capitalistic. In 2022, the Index of Economic Freedom, out of the 177 countries represented, only 7 countries on the planet are considered free market economies, and 89 countries are considered mostly unfree or repressed. So there's this guy named Jim Bindel, who was the founding director of the Institute for Leadership and Sustainability. He suggested that capitalism needs to be infused with Marxism. He suggests diverse forms of ownership that look a lot like electric cooperatives found in rural US areas. He also seems to suggest a type of social credit score by scrapping all income taxes and shifting the shortfall to taxes on land value, corporate profits, natural resources, and hydrocarbon energy generation. Finally, he suggests a universal wage for every citizen of the planet, replete with reimagining the entire financial system in a government private sector partnership. Although this sounds enticing, what happens when it infringes on individual liberty? Justin Trudeau was able to freeze the bank accounts of political opponents during the trucking protests in February of 2022. Remember, he is a graduate of the WEF Young Leaders School. That paints a very foreboding picture of the potential of government to annihilate the rights of their citizens. Leah West, a professor at Carleton University in Ottawa, expressed concern that in the future, banks may decide that these are not people they want to provide financial services to at all because they've engaged in illegal activity. I mean, would you want someone to give someone a mortgage if you used your house to deal drugs? Probably not. Concerning capitalism, Schwab proposes moving from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. And in 2019, I wrote a paper and explained the differences between capitalism in the US and that in Germany. The US embraces a liberal market capitalism, encourages decisions based on supply and demand and other market considerations, where Germany practices something called coordinated market capitalism, which encourages decisions made through cooperation and mutual benefit of all the stakeholders. So these different approaches to capitalism have great impact on education. If you look at the dual system of education in Germany, I explained that it depends on businesses to partner with schools and work together to accomplish apprenticeships. In order to achieve this, the system is equipped with two important components. One is called the Mittelstand, which is more of the family-run business. And the other is the Mitbestimmung, which is a work council. It's kind of like a union, but it's not a union. So the Mittelstand has a maximum of 499 employees. They're small to medium size, and again, they're more family-run businesses. Then the Mittelstand, the Mitbestimmung, they are the work council that is made up of people from the company that actually, and they basically give everybody a say in what's going to happen in the company. They're different from German unions in that both employees and employers in Germany have unions, and they are industry-based instead of company-based. So work councils have extensive and substantial rights, from overseeing the implementation of employment laws and rights to issues around appointments, contract terminations, and even the layout of a given workplace. So that's the difference, really, is that the German system has this dual thing. Now, I don't know about where Canada is in this whole thing, and I know I'm talking to an audience of a lot of Canadians, so I can't really comment on that. I can just compare those two systems, is the German and the American one. The problem with changing from shareholder to stakeholder is when you pivot from small businesses of less than 500 employees to big business. Multinational corporations have the ability to form private-public partnerships that enable non-elected businesses to create policy for a society. Cancel culture is a prime example of the many problems inherent in a business government enterprise. In a review of Weissman's book, The Crowdsourced Panopticon, Taylor Dodson contends that the consequences of cancellation are disproportionate, violating even retributive theories of justice. Some judge the psychological sting of shame and ostracism as even more hurtful than physical pain. Exposing a person to public derision, ridicule, or abuse has been a method of control for centuries. As late as the end of the 19th century, the pillory was often used to this end. And according to Weissman's book, prisoners said that they preferred 3 months in prison to 1 hour on the pillory. The problem with today's pillory is that it is no longer localized, it is global. Online shaming has left its victims often not just unemployed, but traumatized and even suicidal. When multinational corporations commandeer the stakeholder approach to capitalism, it promotes corporate power and capture in the guise of multi-stakeholder institutions, facilitating global governance with little to no participation of the people who are directly impacted by the policies. Additionally, the fact that many of these actors wear multiple hats, such as the former UK Prime Minister Gordon Brown, who became the go-to expert in several MSIs, such as the 2015 Education Commission, the Education Cannot Wait Fund, the Global Business Coalition for Education, and the International Commission on Financing Global Educational Opportunity, in addition to serving as the chair of the Global Strategic Infrastructure Initiative of the WEF and on the board of the Kofi Annan Foundation, among others. I mean, there's so much intertwining of all of this that nobody is objective anymore. It's really, really frightening. So, global governance. According to the WEF, global governance is a means to manage issues, but traditionally they have been accomplished through diplomacy, treaties, international organizations, but with multi-stakeholderism, it now often operates independently of national governments. The question then is, who holds these people accountable? National governments can be called out by their citizens and civil societies organizations when their policies become problematic. However, NGOs, corporations, and the like aren't accountable to anybody. For example, when considering sustainability, there's a tendency to blame the indigenous population for environmental degradation instead of including them in decision-making. The solution takes the form of Western imperialism or colonialism in new clothes. These organizations maintain that oceans and forests need to be protected from the evil, uncivilized humans. And they take a very moralizing and paternalistic narrative, right? In lieu of including indigenous people, they use non-indigenous, often Western conservationists who have absolutely no idea what they came from, of where they came from. So it's pretty astonishing the way all of this is intermarried. Everything is muddied now. There is no objectivism. They look at people. The WEF look at people as transactions, and that's it. They I think maybe in their heart of hearts they may think that they're helping, but in reality, only 10% of the MSIs focus on human rights: the right to food, health, and education, the right to access to the internet, the right to a healthy environment. They don't look at education as human development. They only look at it as reskilling, standardization, and competition. So what do we do? The ambition of the WEF and their Great Reset is burdened with problems that they just approach with dismissiveness. In fact, to quote, they said, the key is to harness creative instincts toward better outcomes, not just new activities. For the big issues, the results are all that matter. That's their words. They don't care. They don't care. Means justifies, or ends justifies the means. In their drive to solve the problem of poverty across the globe by way of economics and a new social contract, they turn a blind eye to the past centuries of struggle the West has undergone to get where we are. The drive toward stakeholder capitalism in the form of a public-private partnership leaves no room for small family businesses that are the backbone of society. Of course, then, if you want to look at Marxism, look at how Venezuela went just straight down the toilet when it, embraced that. The WEF does not embrace the beauty of nations. They advocate for controlling them. It's all about when we use computing as part of our bodies, and not only are parts of our bodies owned by licensors, but the licensors control what we can do with our bodies, and they can also become the thought police. So what is our answer? The only answer is to celebrate culture. Recognize, repent, and restore. Recognize and repent of the distortions of culture. Restoration comes through the application and outworking of kingdom values and principles. Freedom. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. And education, we need to teach our children. Love is the answer. Wesley Smith, paraphrasing a great saint, summarized it beautifully by saying, if I blend with an AI computer program and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have enhanced capacities that can move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. And that's all I have to say about it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Theresa. And we've, opened that up, covered a lot of ground there. It's very sweeping vision of kind of and pervasive in many countries around the globe for sure. I'll open it up now for comments, observations, or additional kind of discussion as to really where this is all going, and I guess what our response should be and how we deal with that. I mean, in terms of our own responsibilities as citizens. And Bill, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, first of all, Theresa, that was brilliant. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know any of that really in any detail.
Yeah.
There's another acronym that all of us have heard of that's going to become even more important, and that's the WHO, the World Health Organization. In the last few days, I've been bombarded with emails stating that what world leaders want to have happen is for the WHO to be authorized by each nation so that the WHO decides how the globe will respond to pandemics. Okay.
Yes.
And
Yep.
they're going to use pandemics in a stimulus response way. The pandemic, whatever it is, monkeypox, whatever they come up with next, is the stimulus that then allows them to require a certain response to that stimulus. And if you don't do what is required as the response, then they come back with a consequence which you don't like, to force you to toe the line. It's pure naturalism, stimulus response psychology. It's been around a long time, and they're using it for all of the reasons it was created. And in fact, I've been thinking of writing a paper on that because my background's in psychology. And a lot of people don't know how they're using psychology to control people.
Yeah, it's very frightening. The WHO is the health wing of the UN, as you well know. And it goes back that just all, merges together with what the WEF is trying to do.
Right.
So.
Yep. Thank you, Bill and Theresa. Other comments? Oh, I was going to pause the record here.
I was reaching for an old familiar book
Oh, yeah.
that I have on the shelf, Economy